Hello and thank you for joining us. This is Brian, your host of the Parrish the Thought Show. The opinions of said host and our guests have not been sanitized or scientifically tested, so please consume at your own risk. Ladies and gentlemen, and whoever else is listening, welcome back to the program. My next guest today is Arianna Worthen, a 33-year-old single woman and member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She opens up about the joys and challenges of dating in the LDS community while living in the motherland of Utah. There may just be too many choices for one girl to make. Ari, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. Okay, as a younger, single member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Thank you for calling me younger.
Younger? Well, you're younger than me, so that qualifies.
Incredible.
And you were talking to me about the kind of the challenge of being, and for those who don't know about a lot about the LDS culture, sometimes being single is like death. It's a sin worse than death, being single. I know for the men, if they're not married by age 25, they're considered a menace to society. In Mormon folklore, apparently Brigham Young said that, correct? That
oh, did he?
Men are a menace to society if they're not married because they're just like animals on the hunt. I don't know if there's a similar thing for women. Is there? Is there
probably.
A certain age where you're dangerous now that you're...
Oh gosh, I feel like it's younger for women than it is men because
And
we've got
be
a
real.
biological clock ticking. So
What your clock ticking? And you're how old?
I'm 33.
33. I don't think there is one for ladies. I think you guys can just be single as long as you want, according to the culture. But yes, biological clock. So tell me what it is about the challenge you have dating. Also, you mentioned earlier that being faithfully active in the church can be challenging if friends are not, or friends are leaving, because there's, I wouldn't say people are leaving the church in droves, but
it certainly exists.
It happens. Yeah. People have their faith journeys. So tell me what it is about that's the challenge for you.
Yeah, I think that maybe I'll start with a little bit of background. I was born here in Utah, but I was raised in New Zealand. And so I grew up in an LDS community that was quite a bit different from here in Utah. Smaller, for sure. And I guess as a result, there were some cultural differences. Now, I moved here to Utah 5 years ago, almost. And I love living here, by the way. Like I think there's so much opportunity here. I've met some incredible people. It's beautiful. I hope I never move from Utah, if I'm being honest.
You better be honest. No liars on this show.
Okay, I'll try. So yeah, I really love this state, but I have noticed growing up outside of it and then moving into it, some differences between here and other places. And I have lived in multiple other countries and other states within the US, so I have seen major differences culturally, especially when it comes to dating. So when I first moved here, I was really excited because the LDS population is obviously larger here than anywhere else.
No way.
Maybe besides Tonga.
Get out. Are you saying, if I understood you correctly, you're suggesting that there might be more Mormons here in Utah than anywhere else?
Yes, most likely. In case you didn't know that. Surprise.
Okay. Fair enough.
And so I was excited because I moved here when I was 29. Now, in New Zealand, there was like nobody left LDS single over 25. So I was like, you know what? This is probably not what's best for me. So let me move. I mean, that wasn't the only reason for me moving, but I was just excited to be able to date people of my faith that were around my age. And then I started to notice that Utah came with some like pretty interesting dating habits. I don't know if you call it a habit, maybe, culture or
dating
behaviors.
Behaviors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
like what?
oh, there are so many,
Peculiar.
but I'll give
me one.
Okay, because there are so many people of our faith here. It's kind of like the kid in a candy store concept, where it's like there is, and I call it an illusion, by the way, but the illusion of having so many options, and people just can't like quite pick one and stick with one. So they take one piece of candy, but they just like, they can't help but want a different one and want more. That's my best analogy.
That's a good analogy.
Kid in a candy store. And I get it because I've been there and I've done it over the past.
But then you find that some of the candy tastes nasty and some of it's really good, right?
Some of it's really good and you probably shouldn't have let it go.
Okay.
So anyways, I noticed that a lot of like the searching for perfection and thinking that perfection actually exists because of the numbers here. But again, the illusion of the numbers, like, oh, well, he's got this wrong or she's got that wrong. It's not worth working through. I know that I've got a bench or a roster over there full of people that I can try and date.
Do you think that's I have this theory about like the dating apps, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And the downside of that is because there's so many quote unquote options according to the numbers that back in the olden days when I was dating in the 80s, you didn't have any of this. If something wasn't quote unquote perfect, you went out on another date. You tried again. You gave it more chances. Whereas now, swipe it, next.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think that plays a role. Combined with the fact that we do have a big LDS pop community here.
More candy.
Yeah, more candy.
Okay.
Which can be great for time, but then I think eventually at some point it's not so great.
You want a meal, not a piece of candy.
Yeah.
If we're using food analogies.
Well, we want to progress at some point.
Okay.
And so anyway, if you talk to single adults, I have friends, in their early 20s right up until like mid 40s who are single, and they all really complain about the same thing. And it's almost like the older you get, the more your pull shrinks because, people obviously going off and getting married, the lucky ones, or they are leaving the church. And if you have a desire to marry someone within the gospel, then that really shrinks your dating pool. And that's another challenge in and of itself. There's a lot of people out there, including myself, that are like optimistic about it and at the same time kind of torn. Like, well, what do I really want? There are a lot of people in this demographic who are leaving the church. And so we're kind of stuck here like, well, I still believe in it. I really want to live it. Do I, for the sake of numbers, like, do I limit myself to those who have remained in the gospel, or do I consider dating those outside of the gospel who are good people, they just no longer believe?
Would it be worth it to pursue if you met somebody who did leave the church? Would that be a deal breaker for you? If someone was in all other respects like checked off every box for you except for that one, would that be a deal breaker?
I want to say no, but I think I've experienced enough in life to know that I don't really want to put like an absolute on it.
Because the chances that person maybe coming back in are still there.
Yeah. It's not ideal. Like, it's not what I want ideally, but I'm not going to put a hard no on it at this point. Okay. So yeah, it can be pretty frustrating out there right now.
Well, so how are you navigating that? How have you, since you moved here 5 years ago, what has changed in your approach to
oh my gosh, well,
seeking an eternal companion?
Yeah, great. I know
or
that,
even a temporary one, I guess.
Yeah,
is fine too.
Yeah, that's true. Well, for one, I've had to do a lot of my own growing up. Obviously, that I've realized that I've come to realize that the more I can focus on my relationship with myself, rather than these outward relationships with others, I am like attracting in the certain types that I'm looking for. I definitely haven't found the one yet, but as I've like dated throughout the years here, I feel like I've gotten closer to who it is I really want to be with. But that's only come as a result of me coming to know myself more and what it is that I really want. So I think that's something I see a lot, like within my friends groups, is people, you know, complaining there's no one good out there, there's no good guys left, or there's no good girls left. You know, we have to go out of state. I hear that a lot.
We have to go shopping out of state.
Yeah, we have to. We call it. There's a term for it, and we either need to go out of state and find someone, or we want to find an import. And an import is someone who was not raised in Utah, because apparently they're.
Are the ones the ones that are raised here, are they less than ideal?
They're seen as like having all the poor behaviors of a.
Because they've never experienced anything different outside of here.
Exactly. So, yeah, that attitude definitely exists of like, well, the guys here suck, or the girls here suck. But I believe that partially, but then I'm also a big believer in taking responsibility for ourselves first. And I really do think that if we can just focus on improving and aligning ourselves with our truth, whatever that is, that we will just be naturally drawn to or attract in those same types of people.
Yeah, you have to become what you want.
Exactly.
Which a lot of people like want perfection in someone they meet, but they're not willing to live that way. And that math doesn't work out. No,
it doesn't. And I've only learned that lesson in the past like 6 months, more so heavily in the past 3 months. So it's a new lesson for me, and I'm 33, but I've almost been forced to do it because, you know, I haven't had things work out the way that I've wanted in this particular area of my life. And I've had to take a good hard look at myself and be like, okay, I'm the common denominator here. Like,
which is huge to recognize that. That's a huge mature position to have.
Yeah.
When you said, I'm the common denominator, what am I doing that could change?
Yeah. What can I improve? What can I work on? And I think once I had that shift in mindset, I was able to have more, I felt like I was in control more rather than.
Because you are.
Yeah. Well,
you're relying on your happiness on someone else.
Correct. Yeah. Or the outcome of a relationship. Yeah. Where now I'm like, well, hang on. Let me focus on improving and the ways I need to improve upon, and put time and effort into that. As a result, I'm going to feel better as an individual first and foremost. Secondly, I can be a better friend and sister and coworker and, you know, citizen to those around me. But then hopefully as a result, I find my person too. So to be continued on that one.
To be continued. Yeah, maybe we'll have to do a follow-up when you find your person.
He's going to have to be really special.
Well, and should be. I got married when I was 30. And I'm sure people were worried about me. I didn't grow up in the church, so I didn't have that pressure from family. Like, what's wrong with you? You must be broken because you're not married at 22.
I know. Oh my God.
Which is nuts to think about.
So you were 30?
I was 30.
Nice.
So, but yeah, I had a friend who got married when he was 40 for the first time. And 2 days ago, another friend he's 43, just got married for the first time.
Amazing.
So I don't know if there's obviously society, people are married in their 20s. That's normal. That's more popular, or just more normal. But have you thought that there's something wrong with you?
Oh,
because
for sure.
Oh my gosh, you're an attractive young woman. You're 33. You're not married. And I'm sure people think that too, because that's
absolutely. We're like, well, what's wrong with me?
You seem really cool.
And I see that in my friends too, both guys and girls, we were just like, oh, is there something wrong? And like I said, I think it's really important to identify the areas in which you need to work on regardless. But Yeah, those thoughts definitely cross my mind, and I just have to remind myself that, all of our paths look different, and the timeline of events in which these things happen don't always look the same for each of us.
Yeah.
And that's okay, and that there's beauty in that.
And you're not broken.
No.
Or there's nothing wrong.
No.
But we tend to go there sometimes.
It's easy to get into that space.
They're like, ooh, she must be crazy.
Well, yeah, I'm joking. Maybe. I mean, I think we've all got a little crazy in us.
Of course we do. But I remember I've had conversations with like, oh, well, I see some attractive woman and she's not married, and my brain goes there. Like,
exactly. Like, why
not?
She
must be a wacko. Mm-hmm. There must be more to the package that I'm seeing. She must be loony.
Sure.
It's kind of silly.
With men. Oh, with men.
Yeah. What do you see as a man? What do you see?
Oh, the classic is like, he's for sure a narcissist. That's like the word now that's thrown out there for guys. Yeah. Always. Like for the women, it's, they're crazy. And for the guys, it's like, he's a narcissist.
And rather than it probably should be, maybe they're just choosing wisely because this is a big decision. Mm-hmm. And obviously you'll never know a person. You can't know. I've been married for 24 years. My wife and I have evolved a lot.
Yeah.
There's no way you can know what you're going to be or how you're going to feel.
No.
I'm sure there's some day she looks at me and says, "Oh man, I settled." I'm sure there's days when
maybe
she's like, well, who are you again? And why did we like each other? What's going on here?
It's a risk you take.
It's a risk.
And it is.
It's a gamble.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know. And each one of you brings a whole life to a marriage that could be polar opposites. And then unless you're actively working at that every day and knowing yourself, and there's still things that I say to my wife or that I probably should know about her that I don't.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's something I don't do a very good job of nurturing our relationship. No, I don't think I do near a good enough job of doing that. You get busy, you have kids come, you have financial challenges, life challenges.
It's life.
Things, there's a lot to deal with.
There's a lot of life.
If you bring in your own traumas that you either
which
do or do not know about.
Which we all do.
Yeah, and everybody has something.
We've all got them. Mm-hmm. And then you also can't control the other person.
Nope. And you cannot rely on them for your happiness.
Nope.
They can do things that will make you choosing to be happy easier.
Yes.
And it's interesting, you talk of love and this unconditional love thing, and I've never really bought into that. With my kids, yes.
Yeah.
With other adults, I don't think it's real, because if I'm a complete asshole to my wife, and I have been at times where she's probably wanted to walk away, I expect that because I have to earn that. I don't expect her just to take all my garbage and just, la-ti-da, I just love you because you're...
Because I married you.
And that's what I'm supposed to do. No. That has to be something that's nurtured and worked on all the time, and I probably fail often.
I'm sure everyone does, though.
And then you got to just decide if that's worth trying. And
yeah. But that is the risk you take. And so I think there are people out there who are just slow moving into jumping in. And then there are a lot of divorce. I'm a divorcee. There's a ton of us here.
I didn't for some reason know that.
Didn't you know that? Oh.
Maybe you mentioned it once. Tell me about that. How long were you
married?
Yeah,
so I was actually married at 19.
Which I think is way too young. Honestly.
Very young. My parents tried to candidly try to talk me out of it.
Okay.
But I was very stubborn and...
Of course, yeah. Because what do they know, right?
Exactly. I knew everything.
And you wouldn't
19.
have
Of course I did. What do you mean?
And now looking back...
I'm like, oh my gosh, my parents...
Were so right.
Were so wise.
How long were you married?
4.5 years. And he was also very young. He was 20, I think 22, 23. It's kind of like fresh-ish off the mission. But that's what I was taught to do growing up in Young Women's. It was You get through Young Women's, and the next step, I mean, now I think it's a bit more common to teach girls to go get an education and encourage them to do that. But back then it was like, well, you get married and you have a family. And so I was like, well, this is it. I had no idea what I was doing. I look at other people that got married around that age, or like anywhere between 19 and 25, and they're still married. And I'm like, good for you guys. Because I did not know who I was. I didn't know at that time how to receive answers to prayer. I didn't have the information and the experience and wisdom that I have now to know what to look for in someone when I'm choosing an ideal partner or an ideal spouse. Like I don't know any of that stuff.
Because you're still a child.
I was a child. I only know what I know now because of the experiences I've had, but I'm 33 now.
And that's, again, for those who aren't familiar with the LDS culture, we're encouraged to get married very young. While it works out for some, I think generally speaking, it's not, mandated, obviously, but I think it's too young.
Yeah.
At 19, I couldn't even get out of my own way.
No, I had no idea what I was doing.
I would have been divorced, I'm sure more than once had I got married that young, I think.
Yeah, it's too, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I look back and I'm like, I don't really ever have the mindset of, oh, I should have done that different, or I could have done that differently, or would I have if I don't really go down that path because I feel like that kind of thinking doesn't really serve me. So I more just try to focus on, well, what did I learn from it? What wisdom did I gain? And how can I ensure that I am implementing that into my life now? And sometimes, I've had to learn the lesson, especially when it comes to dating, over and over again. But each time I try and take a bit of knowledge and carry it with me for the next one.
Looking back on that marriage, when did you know, like, ooh, this was maybe not the best decision?
Probably 3 years in.
Oh, so you went a long time before you.
Mm-hmm.
And did he change at all? Or who? I mean, did you? You
Me.
both obviously changed, but you.
I'm
just had
the
a
one
different,
that. Yeah.
Was he the same? You just like, I don't.
Yeah, he
think
stayed the same. I'm the one that definitely did a lot more of the changing, and
for yourself, or because you thought you needed to do it for him.
For myself, I just grew up, and I know it was only 3 years, but you can grow up a lot in 3 years, and then in the fourth year, and then kind of going into the fifth year, I was like, I think I made the wrong decision. So I had to choose then. Do I stay and just like make it work, which I could have, or do I leave because I don't think this was the right decision. And it was really hard for me, especially I was like a young women's president at the time in my ward. I was very active. I come from a family where they are too. And so it was a really, really difficult decision for me.
Was it difficult for you, or because of what you thought? How you thought
I know what you're asking.
To the culture,
the latter,
to your family.
the latter.
The letter, like the letter. What do you mean?
The latter.
Oh, the latter.
It's my accent. Sorry, I'm trying to change it to be American.
No.
Yeah, for me it was actually
the social pressure.
It was
pressure, like, oh, she failed at something so great and big.
Yeah.
Would you have made the decision to leave sooner had you not felt the social pressure?
Probably, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how did he take it? So it wasn't mutual. You were just like, I don't.
He didn't want to at first, but honestly, it ended up being pretty amicable. And he's a really good guy. I'll still hear from him from time to time, and we've had conversations over the years where I have nothing but love and gratitude for him now. And he's happy in living the life that he is, and I'm here. So
And you're here. You're just here.
I'm just here.
Not happy living the life you're living.
No, I am actually very happy. I mean, it's a roller coaster, but for the most part, I'm very grateful for the life that I live.
Roller coasters are fun.
I actually hate roller coasters.
Well, generally speaking, roller coasters are fun.
Are they though?
The downs
They
are fun, the ups are
terrify
fun, the
me.
anticipation on the ups to the coming up. So you could look at a roller coaster as.
But that's life. That's life. I'm learning that.
Yeah.
It's just part of life. It's not to expect to be happy all the time. Isn't even. It's not even a reality.
Because if you are, then the opposition in all things. If you don't know good, you won't know bad, and
then where's the growth?
yeah, if everything's the same all the time, there is none.
I feel like most people would probably agree with me. I have grown the most from my difficult moments. It's
where
not
you're uncomfortable. Because when you're uncomfortable, you change things because you don't want to be uncomfortable.
Exactly. But when I'm just like sitting happily and just cruising along, no, I'm not making any progress. I sure love those moments for like, I get to breathe and I'm like, oh, that's great. But I'm learning to appreciate the uncomfortable moments too.
And then when you don't have them, it's because my thinking is like, I want them to come, but you almost have to create your own. Because hey God, can I have some uncomfortable moments today? And he's not just going to give those to you. I mean, you almost have to create your own.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm good at that.
I'm not good at creating uncomfortable. I like to be comfortable. We like to be comfortable. It's normal. The brain says this is hard. Don't do this.
Yeah, I'm good at it. I don't necessarily like it, but
yeah.
So, we'll see what happens. I'm excited for my future.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on this topic, what else do you want to share, or maybe that you want people to know, or maybe advice to your 19-year-old self? What would you say to her?
Yeah, that there's no rush to and specifically with getting married. Yeah, there's no rush. At the same time, I think that 19 was just far too young, but it's really important to get to know ourselves a bit better before we make a commitment such as marriage, because it is a life-altering decision, and who we choose to marry really can change dramatically on who you choose, and plays a role in the way that your life ends up looking, honestly.
Yeah.
And so just to take time to learn to love yourself more and know yourself.
It's hard to do.
Really, really difficult.
Because we usually bash our own selves.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. If one believes in God and Satan, if you believe in those powers, he doesn't want you to be happy. So he's gonna. You just think about when you make a dumb decision. You think it's a dumb decision, and you're like, oh, you stupid idiot! What are you thinking? And you're saying that to yourself. But you're so used to doing it, you don't even notice how harmful it is. But if you said half the things you say to yourself to your friends, you wouldn't have any friends.
No.
And I think it's easier.
Exactly.
Because you don't get hurt. If you said those things and it hurt you the way it would probably hurt your friends, you would never say those things.
But in reality, it does hurt you, right?
It does, but it's so subtle.
Yeah. But years of it.
Years of it. Mm-hmm. It's your comfort and misery.
And then we get to a point, though, where we're like, oh,
yeah,
there's something here.
Okay, in the beginning, we talked about some of the navigation, some of the challenges in navigating this is your friends, boyfriends, dating opportunities that are leaving the faith, mm-hmm. and the faith crisis that's happening. What's your concerns around that?
Yeah, and I think it's not even just within dating, it is, but also just in friendships. Even within the 5 years that I've lived here, I've noticed that there is a greater divide between those who are remaining or choosing to remain in the faith and those who are choosing to leave. And when I say divide, I feel like there is, unfortunately, less tolerance for those on either side. So I feel like a few years ago, it used to be more of like, oh, well, you're figuring it out. Oh, you've chosen to leave. Okay, well, we still love you, we still care for you, we can kind of still be around each other and it be okay. Whereas now I feel like people are being forced to choose a side and then stick to that side. And I'm not really sure why, but it's just starting to look like that.
It's the politics of faith.
What do you mean?
Well, there's politics, and you're seeing that in politics.
Oh, gotcha.
Whether you're Republican or Democrat, whatever party you subscribe to.
That's a good way of putting it, actually.
It's volatile, it's vitriolic, it's venom spewing, and it's an us versus them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
it
feels
transfers,
that way.
That translates over into the gospel and membership of the church as well.
Yeah, and by the way, I've seen it from both sides going, like, aimed toward the other side. It goes both ways.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, oh, well, we'll just tolerate you now.
Mm-hmm.
And what about...
Yeah, exactly. Rather than loving.
The commandment of loving your neighbor. Mm-hmm. Jesus didn't say, love your neighbor if they're in the club or if they look like you or talk like you or think like you. He said, love your neighbor. And my theory as to why we're seeing so much of this now is, I think Satan's stirring the pot, stirring men's hearts and women's hearts. But it's to give us opportunities to love those who are different.
Yeah.
And I've got some of that in my family in terms of, and most of the arguments have been around politics, but it doesn't do any good to argue.
No.
And try to fix or save them.
No.
Because, or we'll pray for you. We'll put your name in the. That's patronizing. And
it is when it comes to the way in which they have chosen to live their life and what they have identified as what makes them happy.
Yeah. Well, one of my daughters left the church, and then she moved out, and she wasn't happy with it. She wasn't angry. She was angry with us, and she felt like people were still reaching out to her from the ward, from the church, from the congregation, and she hated it. And now that she's been out of the home for a couple years, she's still not in the church anymore. But I have the best relationship with her that we've ever had, and she's matured, and she's a more decent human being than she was, because she was kind of snarky. But she has really evolved, and I love hanging out with her now.
Awesome.
And if she ever comes back to the church, would that be great? Sure. But I have a relationship with her, and that's more important to me.
Yeah.
And my older daughter as well. She left the church as well. And things upset her about it. And she hears things, and sometimes she says, how can you guys be a part of this club, this church that supports things that hurt me? And I think almost wanted us to not be in it. But me staying in it, that's where I learned how to be a better father and a better friend.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm going to stay in it and try to make it better. Try to teach people better. Not that I have all the answers, but what I've learned.
Yeah, and I think the church needs that. I think it needs its members who are more like you in the sense that they are able to love those who believe and choose to live differently, while still keeping their voice of sharing their voice, their testimony. Because, like you and I have talked about before, the two should coexist.
And they can.
Yeah.
We just have to. And there's a mentality in politics that's also, again, spilled over into religion, that if I talk to the opposition, the enemy, then I'm giving up my values and I'm supporting what the enemy stands for. And I just don't think that's true.
No.
I'm fascinated by people leaving the church, and I'm fascinated by people coming into the church. Mm-hmm. I want to know their stories. I want to know what choices or what things have happened to them in their lives that have caused them to think that coming in is a good idea and leaving is a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think if we go about it with that attitude of understanding as a baseline,
seeking to understand.
I don't see a downside.
No, and I grew up in it. I don't think I've ever left, but I definitely was an actor for a few years, and then I came back, and even that journey in itself has kind of been up and down. It hasn't been linear at all. But over the past few months, I've decided that I really want to go all in again. But that's been a process. It's taken me years. So I've got a unique perspective in that I've grown up with it. I've lived with it. I've lived without it. And so I'm like you. I really appreciate learning about those who have left and who have decided to come into it. There's so much to learn there. And I think the more information we can gather and the more we can learn to appreciate each other's differences and experiences, the more we're able to bless the lives of others. That's what I've come to find. And yeah, I love it.
Fine. Be that way.
You be that way. And tell me what to do.
Well, and having the relationships with people now, and there's a fear. Well, if my whole family is in the gospel and we're an eternal family and we were sealed in the temple, that if some of them choose to step away from that now, that somehow our family won't be eternal anymore. And in all fairness, maybe like, I don't even like you guys now. Why would I want to be with you eternally? But
valid.
My theory is God's going to work out all those details, and he wants us to love people, to love our kids and love our family, love our friends. That, to me, those relationships, those are the ones I can control. I can't control when I die. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, we have the gospel plan, and it makes sense. I don't know that it's true.
But we don't have all of the information. We are not all knowing. Sometimes I think it's easy to get caught up and think that we do know it all, but we really don't. We don't. People are so complex, the way that we're made up, all the experiences we've had, just the way that we're wired. God knows it all. So thankfully for me and for everyone else, at the end of the day, I am not the judge. He is. And so I agree that I think everything will be made right in the end, because he is a loving God, and I think that he will be made well in the end. So cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Cheers to that. Amen. Any other final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts would be, and
to our fans,
to all my fans out there, who don't exist, would be, you and I have talked about this briefly, but it would be to, if you haven't already, identify what truth is to you and what it looks like, and then to align yourself with that truth, like live in a way that aligns with that, because that will weather you through the storms of life. I think there is peace to be found there. And in addition to that, to respect and love others when they choose a different truth than you.
When they choose a different path, yeah, they're still the same person.
They're still the same person.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, that's really, I think, how we experience joy and experience peace, is by staying true to what we believe.
Well, and being angry over someone else's decisions is fruitless. It doesn't serve anyone.
Oh, it doesn't serve you and doesn't serve them.
If they're not hurting somebody.
Exactly. Well, yeah, obviously there's an exception.
And there may be a perception that they may be hurting themselves by going away from the faith. But, and I haven't seen a lot, but the ones that I have seen that have stepped away from the faith, they're not living miserable lives.
No.
So far as I can tell. And
yeah, I mean, I've seen some that have, but not all. Not all.
But it may not be. My guess is that they might have had if the ones that you've seen that are quote unquote miserable may have been miserable had they stayed in. It's not because of their membership in the
I'm
church.
open to that. Yeah,
possibly, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you.
So to be continued.
Ari, to be continued.
Let's meet back here in 12 months
in 12 months when you're married.
That would be amazing.
Seriously dating or whatever.
Let's have him on the show.
Yes, him. Maybe you'll have a dream about him and you can give me a name.
We'll see. I actually have no idea who it could be. So
well, that's from my perspective. I think that not that I'm not happily married, but the excitement of the unknown of that I think is exciting.
True.
But maybe it's not. Maybe it's a burden.
Hey, I think it can be both.
Okay.
But thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming. It's been great talking with you. Thank you again for listening to the Parrish the Thought Show. We would love your comments and feedback on our website at briankeithparrish.com/feedback. If you love or hate what you hear, please give us a rating on whatever platform you find us. You're still here? Click on the next episode for more from the Parrish the Thought Show.